What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing. The Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series will continue its conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. I wanted to talk about Jack Johnson and his conversation. In our last conversation, we talked about the old master, Joe Gans. And what's interesting about Jack Johnson and Joe Gans' era, they would basically relay off one another. What do I mean? Jack Johnson became the colored heavyweight champion February 5th, 1903, in a 20-round decision over Denver Ed Martin, who, by the way, was a very good fighter. He was very clever in the ring. Now, Jack Johnson was born John Arthur Johnson, March 31st, 1878, in Galveston, Texas. He would die June 10th, 1946. He was 68 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Raleigh, North Carolina. Let's talk about what legend has as to how Jack Johnson actually died. Well, Jack Johnson, as you know, was the world heavyweight champion from 1908 to 1915. You know his story about, in fact, we didn't get to that part yet in this series, but he made a deal with the government, and he would wind up leaving Cuba, coming to the United States. He would have to do a year and a day, and he was released. Now, Jack Johnson would open up businesses in Harlem, New York, Supper Club, as well as Chicago. He was ran out by Artie Manning and Al Capone. They sabotaged his establishment, strong-armed it, and took away his businesses. Well, eventually he would invent a wrench, and that wrench would be called a monkey wrench. You figure out why that name was given off of an invention of Jack Johnson. Today you know it as a pipe wrench. But Jack Johnson will connect the dots between him and Joe Gans in a moment. He fought from 1897 to 1931. So going back to the story of how Jack Johnson apparently died. He was heading towards a fight with Billy Conn and Joe Louis. And legend has it he stopped at a restaurant. He had a companion in the car with him. And he went on his daily routine of going into the front of a restaurant. And he was told that he had to go around the back of the restaurant. Now this upset Jack Johnson because Jack Johnson was accustomed to the royal treatment that he would receive as world heavyweight champion. But Jack Johnson was really a hated man. And it wasn't tolerated anymore for Jack Johnson in certain states. So he was very upset about this. Now, I don't know if he picked up his food or he just walked away from the front of the restaurant, got into his car, and once again, according to legend, he spun around the bend or curb and flipped over side of a hill and crashed into a stone. Now, the companion at that point would probably be the only one that can contest to that part of the story because he survived. Jack Johnson did not. Jack Johnson was a hated man, and who knows what really happened. But that's the story that we have. He defeated Joe Jeanette and Sam Langford, battling Jim Johnson. He was in a ring with Jim Jeffries, July 4th, 1910 in Reno, Nevada. And he would go 15 rounds before he stopped Jim Jeffries. The referee was Tex Rickard. And he humiliated Jim Jeffries. He was playing with him like a sparring partner. Now keep in mind, Jim Jeffries did lose 100 pounds. He was out of the ring for several years. But that's not Jack Johnson's problem. He was after Jim Jeffries' title back since 1904. Jim Jeffries had retired in 1905. Jack Johnson was also in the ring with Stanley Ketchel, October 16, 1909, Madison Street Arena. He would stop him in 12 rounds. The referee was Jack Welch. Jack Welch has a very interesting referee history. We'll talk about him at some point in time in this series. Jack Welch would also be the referee for Jack Johnson and Jess Willard and Cuba Havana. 26th famous knockout. Jack Johnson was apparently seen in photos shielding his eyes. We'll get to that bout in 1915 when we get to that part of the series. But Jack Welch would also be the famous referee that would be involved in a double knockdown with Ad Wargas and Mexican Joe Rivers. We'll talk about Jack Welch. But Jack Johnson would also be in the ring with Philadelphia Jack O'Brien on the night of May 19, 1909 at the National Athletic Club in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That bout went 6 rounds. It was a draw. He would take on Tommy Burns December 26, 1908 in Sydney Stadium, Australia. He would KO him in 14 rounds, and Hugh McIntosh was the referee. He would take on the likes of the Oxnard Cyclone, Sam McVeigh, Black Bill, Joe Grimm, Young Peter Jackson, Frank Childs, Marvin Hart, Jack Jeffries. Jack Jeffries was the brother of Jim Jeffries, so he fought both Jeffries brothers. Joe Butler was an outstanding colored heavyweight champion. Sandy Ferguson, Hank Griffin, George Gardner, who was a light heavyweight champion in 1903. Peter Felix, who was the cousin of Peter Jackson, Peter the Great. He would lose his title to Jess Willard April 5th, 1915 in Oriental Park, Havana, Cuba. 26 rounds, he would be stopped. He couldn't continue. And that's the story of the establishment. But Jack Johnson's story was that he took a dive because he made a deal with the government. Sam McVeigh, the color champion, February 20th, 1909, 20 rounds. He would defeat him. Now, what's interesting about Sam McVeigh and Joe Jeanette, these two men would have a contest that you wouldn't believe. They would fight each other 3 times in 1909. But on April 17th of 1909, 49 knockdowns. What a hell of a fight. We'll talk about that. In fact, we discussed that, but we'll talk more about that as the series goes on. Now, the Oxnard Cyclone was born May 17, 1884 in Oxnard, California. He died December 23rd, 1921. He was 37 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Oxnard, California. Thanks for watching Scrapbook Boxing Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights and all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Let's continue with the series, The Complete History of Boxing. Thanks for watching. Be well. Peace.